In this video, we are going to learn about the third subtopic of life processes chapter, transportation. Okay, so we will be learning about transportation in human beings and also transportation in plants. Okay, so what is transportation? What is transported in our body from one place to another? In our previous videos, we learned about the process of digestion. All the nutrients present in our food materials are converted into its simplest form. Okay, you can take glucose as an example. Starch is converted into its simplest form, glucose, right? Then we learned about respiration, where we learned the oxygen that we are taking in during inhalation, okay, is taken to all the cells and the tissue, right? So glucose will also enter into the cell. The oxygen that we are consuming or that we are inhaling is also entering in the cell. So where the oxygen is utilized to break down the glucose to release energy, right? Now, how this oxygen reaches all these cells, right? How this digested nutrients enter into our cells, okay? What is transporting all these to our cells and the tissue, okay? Now we have blood, right? Blood is the fluid connective tissue that transport all the nutrients, oxygen to all the cells and the tissue, and also takes away all the waste material from our cells and give it back to our excretory system and to our lungs to eliminate the waste materials. Okay, so under transportation, first we will discuss about the blood. So blood is the fluid connective tissue. It consists of two main components, plasma and blood cells. Plasma is the liquid component and cells includes RBC, WBC and platelets. So first we will discuss about the plasma. What is the role of plasma in our body? So plasma contain 55 percentage of water. Okay, remaining 45 percentage in our plasma is the blood cells which are suspended in our plasma. Okay, now what is going to Now, what is the function of this plasma? Plasma carries nutrients, waste materials, even hormones also carried by the blood plasma. Okay, so plasma is the liquid component. 55 percentage of plasma is water. 45 percentage is the blood cells that are suspended in our plasma. And the function of the plasma is to carry the nutrients, waste materials in our body. Okay, next we will discuss about the blood cells. Okay, RBC, red blood cells, also called as erythrocytes. Okay, now what is the function of this RBC? So RBC contains respiratory pigment called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin contain so RBC contain a respiratory pigment called hemoglobin. So this carries the oxygen to all the cells and the tissue. Okay, and also we learned carbon dioxide is carried by the blood, which is in dissolved form by the plasma. Okay, and for grade 10 CBSE, you don't have that much detail about RBC or the plasma and all. Okay, briefly we have the description so that we are discussing now. Okay, WBC function is protecting our body from microorganisms. Okay, so we can call WBC as soldiers of our body, right? Soldiers of our body. And WBC also called as leukocytes. Okay, WBC also called as leukocytes. Okay, so it protects our body from harmful microorganisms. Now, what is the function of platelets? Platelets helps in blood clotting. Okay, whenever any damage is happening in our blood vessels, okay, internally we have this platelets that helps in clotting of blood to prevent further leakage of our blood, and also externally whenever we are getting any cut or wound, this particular platelets helps in blood clotting. Okay, so we discussed about the blood, the components of blood plasma, RBC, WBC, and the platelets. So next we are going to discuss about the blood vessels. So you know about the blood. Next we are going to learn about the blood vessels. So three types of blood vessels we have. It is arteries, veins, and capillaries. Okay, arteries, veins, and capillaries. Okay, here I have added the diagram of our blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. Arteries, you can find out it is thick blood vessel, narrow lumen, the internal cavity is small, and veins, you can find out it is thin blood vessel and wider lumen. Okay, and what is the purpose of this like thickness in this arteries? Because arteries have to carry the blood with high pressure. Okay, when you look at this capillary diagram, it is very small, right? The reason is the function of capillary is to do the exchange of gases, and it is only one cell thickened blood vessel. Okay, so structurally you got an idea about arteries, veins, and capillaries. Okay, now what type of blood is carried by this arteries? So arteries always carry blood away from the heart. Okay, arteries carries blood away from the heart. The type of blood arteries carries, all the arteries carries oxygenated blood. Okay, all the arteries carries oxygenated blood except pulmonary artery. Okay, that means pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood. Okay, veins, all veins carry blood towards the heart. Veins always brings the blood to the heart. Okay, so imagine if it is our heart, veins function is to bring the blood to the heart. Arteries function is to carry the blood out of the heart. Okay, all veins carries deoxygenated blood except pulmonary vein. So pulmonary vein carries oxygen rich blood from the lungs to the heart. Okay. When you compare these two, thickness is more in arteries and in veins it is less. Lumen, narrow lumen, wider lumen. Okay. Arteries, valves are absent, here valves are present. Okay. What is the function of valves in our blood vessel, or what is the function of valves in our heart? So valve's function is to carry the blood in one direction and prevents backflow of the blood. Prevents backflow of the blood. Okay. So hope you understood about blood vessels, arteries and veins. Next we have about the capillaries. Capillaries are the thinnest blood vessel. Okay, the function is to supply the oxygen, nutrients to all the cells and the tissue and take away the waste material. So it is performing exchange of substances, giving nutrients, taking away waste material, giving oxygen and taking away back the carbon dioxide. Okay, so now we will discuss about the structure of heart. What are the parts present in the human heart? So in our NCRT textbook, we have this diagram. Okay, you should know what are the parts present. So we human beings, we have four chambered heart, right? So our chambers of heart is four. When you compare it with other organisms, if you take fish as an example, fish have only two chambers. Okay, if you take amphibians as an example, amphibians possess three chambered heart. Humans, we have the four chambered heart. Okay, so for fishes, already we learned about the respiration part where the how they are taking in oxygen. They are taking in oxygen through their gills. Okay, the oxygen which is dissolved in water is taken by the gills. Gills are connected with the blood capillaries through which it is supplied to all the cells and the tissue, and the blood is coming to the deoxygenated blood is coming to the heart. So here it is single circulation, the blood is coming to the heart only once. Okay, amphibians, they have three chambered heart, and there is a slight mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood takes place in amphibians. They are cold-blooded organisms. Their body temperature is not depends on our blood, on the blood of the organism, so they can tolerate this. Okay, when it comes to human beings, we are warm-blooded organisms. Okay, we require a proper separation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, and the blood that comes in our heart as deoxygenated blood, and it goes to lungs for oxygenation, and it is coming back to the heart as oxygenated blood, and it is supplied to all the cells and the tissue. So we call this as double circulation. The blood is coming to the heart twice. Okay, so now what are the chambers we have? Upper two chambers are called the atrium, right atrium and left atrium. This is right ventricle and this is left ventricle. Okay, so we have four chambers, and there is a proper separation here. We call it as septum or cross wall. Okay, so septum prevents the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Important 2 mark question. Okay, septum prevents the mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Okay, so now we will discuss how the blood is coming to the heart and how it is going outside. Okay, so right chambers, right atrium and right ventricle, we have deoxygenated blood. Okay, left atrium and left ventricle, we have oxygenated blood. Okay, so right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from upper part of the body and from lower part of the body to the right atrium. Okay, left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. Okay, so lungs, from our lungs. After exchange of gases, blood is coming to the left atrium. So pulmonary veins receives this oxygenated blood from the lungs and brings it to the left atrium. So veins function is to bring the blood to the heart. So superior and inferior vena cava and pulmonary veins brings the blood to the upper chambers of our heart. Okay, so these two chambers are receiving the blood. Now when the atrium contract, okay, here we have like tricuspid and bicuspid valves are present. Here we have this valve, we call it as tricuspid valve. Here it is called the bicuspid valve. Okay, bicuspid valve. So through which the blood can enter into the ventricle. So when the atrium contract, the blood reaches the ventricles. Now when the ventricle is filled with the blood, the ventricles contract. Okay, so from the right ventricle, the deoxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary artery to the lungs for oxygenation. Here also we have another valve at the base of the pulmonary artery. It is called the pulmonary valve. Here, from left ventricle, the oxygenated blood is carried by the aorta to all parts of the body. Okay, to all parts of our body. Okay, we will get the oxygen rich blood. Okay, to all parts of the body. And at the base of the aorta also there is a valve. Okay, what is the name of that valve? Aortic valve. So I will explain it again. So deoxygenated blood enters the right atrium through superior and inferior vena cava from upper and lower part of our body. Oxygenated blood reaches the left atrium through pulmonary veins. When the atrium contract, the valves open, the blood comes to the ventricle. When the ventricles contract, the deoxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary artery to the lungs, and from the left ventricle, the oxygenated blood is carried by the aorta to all parts of the body. Hope you understood about the structure and function of our heart. Okay, and also you have this diagram in your book. Okay, so schematic representation of transport and exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, from the lungs, pulmonary veins bring the oxygen rich blood to the atrium. You can look at the arrow mark. Left atrium is receiving it. Okay, then vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from all parts of our body to the right atrium. Okay, and from the ventricle, the deoxygenated blood is carried by pulmonary artery to the lungs. After exchange of gases, the oxygen rich blood is coming to the left atrium. Okay. Now from the left ventricle, the oxygen rich blood is taken by aorta to all parts of the body. Okay, where the exchange of gases takes place to different in our different parts of our body. Okay. After that exchange of gases, again from our body, it is taken back into our heart. Okay, so this is the schematic representation of exchange of gases in our body. So again, you have a more clear picture about our heart. So you can find out the structure, what are the parts present, right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. Valves are labeled here, pulmonary valve, then here aortic valve, tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve also called as mitral valve, and heart is protected by a membrane called a pericardium. Okay, and also protected by our rib cage. So next we have a small topic related to lymph. Okay, what is this lymph? Okay, so we know our blood vessels are carrying the blood to all the cells and the tissue, right? Blood is carried by the blood vessels to all the cells and the tissue. Okay, when the capillaries are supplying this blood to all the cells and the tissue, okay, maybe supplying the nutrients, supplying the oxygen, right? So during that time, some amount of fluid is leaked out of the cell, okay, which is present between the cells, okay. So this fluid we call it as lymph, okay. It contains plasma and some amount of proteins are present, okay. Now we have this lymphatic capillaries, okay. We have the lymphatic capillaries. These lymphatic capillaries receive all this fluid out of the cell, and the lymphatic capillaries are opens into lymphatic vessels, and lymphatic vessels opens into veins, so that there is no wastage of this fluid out of our cells and the tissue. Whatever leaked from our cells, it is coming back into our circulation through our lymphatic system. Okay. One more function of the lymph, it also carries the digested fats and also supply it to all the cells and the tissues. The hemoglobin contain blood. So RBC contains respiratory pigment called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin contain so